also meaning the skull. So this is a place outside of Jerusalem. It was a hill that looked like a human skull. And Calvary is the place where Christ was crucified. But what really happened? What happened? It was Passover. This was one of the feasts where all male adults from all over the diaspora were supposed to come into Jerusalem for the festival. And as you know, Jesus had gathered his disciples in a room. And while they were gathered, Jesus started doing something very unusual. He took a towel and a basin of water and started washing the feet of the disciples. Then he broke bread and dipped it into some kind of sauce and gave it to them to eat. At this time, Judas was with them, but he got exposed at that point and he slipped out. Now Jesus started telling them a lot of things after doing this. All of that is recorded in the book of John from chapter 13 to chapter 17. And when he was done talking to the disciples, he left the house with them. They went across, there is a river in Israel called the Kidron Valley. And he went into a garden. Just to give you an idea, friends, this is all within 2 miles radius of where the temple was. So to move from Gethsemane or Kidron Valley to the temple is about 1.5 miles. The garden into which they went is called Gethsemane. I don't have the time. I could do something with these things, but Gethsemane as a word means wine press, a place where wine is pressed out. Exactly. It's a place where things are squeezed out. Now John tells us that Jesus used to go to this garden quite often. So Judas had left. And he went and consulted with the Jewish elders that if they would pay him money, he is going to reveal where Jesus is hiding with the disciples. So while Jesus is there with the disciples, Judas shows up with a detachment of troops. If you have time, please read it from John chapter 18, verse 3. We are told about the composition of the people who came. First, there was a band, or what the Bible calls a cohort, meaning these were soldiers from the Antonia fortress. When you go to Israel, even still you see it. The temple is there. There is a tall building which was built by the Romans. It was a fortress, and the soldiers were stationed there because they knew that trouble always brewed out of the temple. So they kept the soldiers close. And so this is the composition of the group that came to the garden with Judas. There was that band, that cohort, probably military men. And then, as you know, there were also what we call temple guards. These were priests and Pharisees. And coming, watch what they are carrying. They were holding lanterns, torches, and weapons. Friends, I want you to picture the scene in your mind's eye. Jesus rises up from prayer and he looks. Soldiers mixed with priests and Pharisees are coming at him with torches and weapons. For the man of sorrows, this must have been very painful. So Jesus meets them and says, "Who do you seek?" Jesus of Nazareth, they say. I am he. And Jesus is with the mob. And when Jesus said, "I am he," they all fell down. Again, they picked themselves up. And Jesus asked them again, "Whom are you seeking?" Jesus of Nazareth, they said. And then Jesus, "I have told you I am he. Then let these go." Apparently what had happened is that they had surrounded all of them. But think about the Jesus who saves you. He knew he was going to go to die. But even in that critical situation, he was thinking about the safety of the disciples. And so he said, "If you are seeking Jesus of Nazareth, I am he. Then let these others go." It is at this point that Simon or Peter draws a sword and cuts the ear of one of the servants of the priests. And Jesus puts it back. Now they arrest Jesus. They bound him and took him. Now it is only John in chapter 18 verse 12 and 13 who tells us that when they bound him, they took him first to Annas. Johannes empatidu and what chichemu and I got him. Johannes empatidu watching and I actually said, "Omochichi Yesu Christo no, baby, omodene kwa kane Annas abaimu." Who was Annas? Why ni Annas? He was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest. Caiaphas, osofo penino, na se any Annas. And friends, this sermon is about the suffering of Christ for your sake and for my sake. And I want to see the kind of suffering that Jesus was suffering at this point. They arrest him and they took him first to Annas. But you see, in the hands of Annas and Caiaphas, Jesus had no chance. Why did they take him to Annas first? After all, Annas is not the high priest. Caiaphas is. But you see, in the tradition, we know that Annas was a notorious figure. He was behind the throne in Jerusalem. He himself was a high priest from AD 6 to AD 15. Jerusalem. 4 of his sons were also high priests. And Caiaphas, who is now the high priest, is his son-in-law. The Annas family was very rich. And one by one, they bribed their way into office.
Afe omu nyina omu fa katase hye anase kuntuna ase ena omu be di tibia omu be true tibia na omu wo no.
And Annas made his money in the most disgraceful way.
Eti Annas sika wonya ya no ode ye animguasede bebre.
He got it out of a disgraceful way.
Onam animguase kwan so ena onya ne sika no.
See, at the temple,
asore dan no mu no,
there were places called the bazaars of Annas.
It's
like the shops of Annas. And there they sold animals for sacrifices. So this is why Jesus went to the temple and drove them out of the place. And you see, what Annas did was this. If you brought an animal from anywhere for your sacrifice, the animal would never be clean. And an animal that was sold for, like, say, 4 cedis was sold at the Annas Bazaar for 75 cedis.
So you will
now understand why Jesus was so upset and drove them out of the place. Because the means by which people will earn salvation was being merchandised.
And
let me pause and make a point here. This is why I speak to my fellow pastors that it is a dangerous thing to use your pastoral office to squeeze ordinary people in the church. It is a most dangerous thing to do. But this is what Annas was doing. And so when they arrested Jesus, Annas was already upset about Jesus for disturbing his business. This is why they took him to Annas first. And in Annas' hands, Jesus had no chance. So they get to Annas' place and they begin to try him as a criminal. But they had no evidence. They had no evidence. And so Annas is struggling to have some evidence. And in John 18:19 onwards, Annas now asks Jesus about his teachings and his disciples. Friends, this is no in Jewish law. You don't seek evidence from a convicted person or condemn him. You must have your evidence which is external. Jesus knows this. Annas knows this. So Jesus replies him, I have spoken openly to the world. And I taught in your synagogue, in the temple, where all the Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you question me? Question those who have heard. They know what I have said. As soon as Jesus said this, there was one of those people standing behind him. Is that how you talk to the high priest? Jesus calmly replies, if I have spoken wrongly, bear witness to it. If not, why do you hate me like that? This is Jesus,
Wei any Kristo Yesu.
the one who created the universe.
The obo ewiase nyina.
So they take him from Annas
Eti afa mo fa ni free Annas fie ono.
and go to the house of Caiaphas.
Na mo de ne call Caiaphas, so for penny Caiaphas
The
ho.
details of what happened is found in Matthew chapter 26.
Nia ekọ so wo Caiaphas ho nyina na ehwe no Matthew asempati aduonu nsia.
The priests are looking for something, some witnesses,
Afa asofo ne epa adanside bi a mo de bo Yesu kwadu.
so they can put him to death.
Na omo de bekunu kura free ho.
Many false witnesses came,
Adansi krumufo mo di adansi ayatro nyina
but they
bae.
contradicted each other.
Afa de na omo hu de omo nyo omo ho de omo ka nyina sisi so.
Finally, two people came up
Afa nkrofo mienu bi bae.
and they said, yes, we have some evidence.
Afa ram se ampa ye wadansi bi ho ha kire.
He is the one who said that he's able to destroy the temple in 3 days.
Ono na ka so betimi asai asore dan no enam yensa.
Then the high priest rose up.
Afa osofo panini sore.
What do you have to answer? What do you have to answer?
Edebe na ho kan de yi wese ano.
Jesus was quiet.
Yesu ankasa.
Friends, that was ridiculous.
Na we enim kwase de.
To begin with, Jesus never said he will destroy the temple and build it in 3 days.
Yesu Kristo ankase obesai asonda no na nansa so wasasi.
They were twisting his words.
Afa ni sem o kan na no mo dane no.
Remember in John 2, when Jesus drove them out of the temple selling stuff,
Afa ohia Yohane asempati mienu abra Yesu Kristo pam mo
the people came to me and said, what sign do you show for what you are doing?
Ana nkrofo mbusa se na de be na wo ye.
And then Jesus said, destroy this temple and I will raise it up in 3 days.
Ana Yesu ka kire o mo se sa nipadua we aya asonda we se no. Mo se no na nansa so
He knew what they were thinking already.
Eti Yesu Kristo de no nim de no o Canada.
Jesus never, he knew what they were thinking already.
Eti Yesu Kristo de no nim de no o Canada.
Jesus never said he will destroy the temple and build it in 3 days.
Yesu Kristo wanka de biara da sa sondan na okopam krofo frim na obesai no no de enam yensa sa asi.
And by the way, even if he had said something like that,
Na se Yesu Kristo aka bibi se kra.
Obi dwana nim so de nansa be buda na sia, you kill him for that? But Jesus is quiet.
Afa Yesu ayedi.
But Caiaphas is desperate.
Afa Caiaphas so na no pre ni pe bibi so de be
He's
bolu kwa.
looking for something. So he tells Jesus,
Afa o ka kire Yesu Kristo say,
I adjure you by the living God.
me say wo ni Kristo Yesu o te ase Onyankopon o te ase no.
You did well. I adjure you by the living God.
O say me de Onyankopon o te ase no ebu waten say,
Tell us whether you are the Christ or the Son of God. Then Jesus said,
Yesu Kristo kan say,
you have said it.
eno no aka no,
But I tell you,
na me ka kire o say,
after here,
efri
after here,
ha
you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power.
ubehu onipa ba ne say, o ti tumi ensa enifa so.
And coming in the clouds of heaven.
Na ona munukum fri esoro eba.
Then Caiaphas rent his clothes.
Afa Caiaphas sign
Please, I
tadi.
hope you are following this disaster going on.
Me diri sa mu de ma.
You had said, tell us whether you are the Son of Man or not.
Wo no aka kire say so wo ni onipa ba no anase nya wo a.
And he says, yes.
Na Yesu
You have said
say
it.
no.
And you will see me soon sitting on the right hand of power.
Na
And,
cha
coming
wo
with
be
the
wo sa me
clouds.
ti tumi ensa nifa so na me free.
And then you rent your
Na
clothes.
fe wo sun so an wo tadim.
And as soon as he did that,
Abra osofo ntete ni tadim no.
they spat on him
Omo tintesuo egu Yesu Kristo so.
and buffeted him
Omo bobɔ na kuturuku.
and smote him.
Omo bɔ na ni so.
It was getting to daybreak.
Afei na awia eboba.
And they intend to take him to Pilate.
Eti na omo amanyu say omo ne be kɔ Pilato ho.
But while they are at Caiaphas' place,
Eti abra no mo Caiaphas ho no.
please notice the suffering that he suffered at the hands of unbelievers.
Na hwɛ amani a wo hunu wo wɔn a wɔn nyi nie ensɛm.
But at Caiaphas' place,
Nanso Caiaphas ho no.
there was a girl who kept the door. He was in charge of the door.
ketewa bi a na ogyina ɛkwan na no.
And Peter and another disciple were following Jesus as they went into Caiaphas.
Eti Petro ɛne asuafo no mu baako edi Yesu akyi ku dɛ ɛhwɛ deɛ bɛyɛ no Caiaphas fie.
Now at the door,
Eti ɛkwan na no hɔ no.
the other disciple who was walking with Peter happened to be known by the girl.
Eti asuafo na nom ne Peter nam no deɛ na akora ketewa ne nim wɔn mo.
Now tradition says that it was probably John because John and his father's business was fish, right? Remember? And they used to supply fish to the high priest. So they knew him.
Miji di sɛ ɛbɛyɛ John efiri sɛ na John ne papa no ɔmo yi nam wɔ ɛpo mu na ɔmo wi a na ɔmo akɔ supply ama nkorɔfoɔ. Eti ɛnam so ɔmo behu no.
So the girl allowed this other disciple to go in.
Eti ɔbaa ne ma ho kwan ɛma asuafo no ewura mu.
And they kept Peter at the door. They kept Peter at the back.
Eti Petro deɛ ɔmo awɔ na nwura mu.
Now John turned around and there was no Peter, so he went back.
Eti John ɛhyɛ ya wɔn na Peter wɔ akyire hɔ nom.
And brought Peter in.
Ɛna ɔtwi Peter ɛbaa mu.
As soon as Peter came in,
Peter wura mu a pɛ.
the girl looked at him
Ɛna ɔbaa no ɛhyɛ Peter anim.
and said,
Ɛna ɔkaa sɛ,
"Are you not one of his disciples?"
wonyɛ Yesu asuafo no mu baako.
I'm not.
Peter sɛ, menyɛ bia.
Friends, we are speaking about Peter.
Anuanom yɛ kasa afa Peter ho.
And I'm sure Jesus saw it all.
Megye di sɛ Yesu Kristo hu ne nyinaa.
And that must hurt.
Na adeɛ no ɛbɛyɛ ya.
Can I apply it here?
Ma me sɛ nsi so bio.
Do you know how it must hurt Christ
Wonim
when
sɛnea-
I, as a pastor, you, as a Seventh-day Adventist, disappoint? You know how it must hurt?
Sɛ wodi Yesu Kristo ehwam a wonim yaw anasɛ amane a anasɛ awerɛhoɔ a wode Kristo Yesu ɛkɔm.
Meanwhile, Caiaphas' officers, they had set up some fire in the house, warming up themselves.
Emu hɔ nso so na Caiaphas emu asraafoɔ ne wɔn a wɔn ne ne yɛ adwuma no asɔ gya a wɔn nyinaa te ho na wɔn tu gya.
And Peter stood with them.
Na Peter nso so ka wɔn ho wɔ hɔ.
They looked at him, these officers looked at him and said, "Are you not one of his disciples?"
Afɛfɛ asraafoɔ ne adwumayɛfoɔ no hwɛ sɛ na wɔn nka suafoɔ no ho bi.
"I am not."
Peter sɛ daabi mɛnka ho.
Then one of the servants of the high priest, who was a brother of the guy whose ear Peter slit,
Afei ɔsɔfopanin akoa baako a yɛtwa n'aso no ne nua baako nso so aba.
"Did I not see you in the garden with him?"
Yɛbɛɛ turo mu ɔnum ahu sɛ ɔka Yesu Kristo ho.
"I am not."
Peter sɛ daabi ɛna ɛna ɛnyɛ mia.
And that's just as Peter said that,
Saa ɛna Petro kaa no.
the cock crew.
Ɔkaa ya ankyɛ ɛna akokɔ ɛbɔnyɛ.
I hope we can have the next slide. I hope we can have the next slide.
Megye di sɛ deɛ ɛtoa so no yɛbɛtumi de deɛ ɛtoa so no aba.
Because Ellen White has some very interesting things to say here.
Ellen White ɛka biribi ɛfa deɛ Peter yɛyɛ no ho.
Yes, keep going, please. While the degrading oaths were fresh upon Peter's lips,
Abra Peter power ɔpaw Yesu Kristo ɛne ntam a ɔkaeɛ no ɛda so gyina n'ano no.
and the shrill crowing of the cock was still ringing in his ears,
Na akokɔ no ɛbɔn ɛwɔ n'aso mu no.
the Savior turned from the frowning judges
Afei atemmuafo a ɔmo amuramura no Yesu Kristo yi n'anim efiri wɔn anim.
and looked full upon his poor disciple.
Na afei ɔhyɛ ne suani no anim kyee.
At the same time,
Ɛbrɛ korɔ no a
Peter's eyes were drawn to the master.
afei Peter nso anim ɛkɔtɔɔ Yesu anim.
In that gentle countenance, he read deep pity and sorrow. But there was no anger there. There was no anger there. I love Jesus. So at the hands of his enemies, Jesus had suffered an unjust trial. But perhaps more painfully, in the hands of his trusted friend. He had suffered a grave denial. Well, it's early Friday morning. And now they move from Caiaphas' place to Pilate. And they brought Jesus to the judgment hall in Pilate's place. But the text is very interesting. They themselves will not go into the judgment place. Because if they went into Pilate's judgment place, Pilate being a Gentile, they will be defiled. And if they are defiled, remember it is Passover. If they are defiled, they cannot spread the Passover. Do you get it? For these people, ceremonial defilement is worse than killing. And so they are willing to put Christ on the cross, kill him, and then go home and eat the Passover. And meanwhile, the real Passover was there, and they knew it not. Anyway, Pilate comes out and asks them, what is your accusation? What's all this all about? Now they answer Pilate in a very disrespectful way. If he was not a criminal, we wouldn't bring him here. And Pilate said, okay. Go and dispose of it yourself. Go take care of it yourself. Then the Sanhedrin replies and gives away their real intentions. We have no right to execute someone. So their minds were made up. And when you combine John's account with the account of Luke in chapter 23, now they had to force themselves to come up with some accusations.
It is John and Luke chapter 26 here.
3 charges. He perverts the nation. In other words, he troubles the nation. Now friends, this is Jews speaking. He forbids us Jews from paying tribute to the emperor. Thread. He says he is Christ, a king. See what they are doing? What this boils down to is that Pilate, this man, is a dangerous political person. And Pilate gets the point.
afei Pilato hu deɛ ɔmo pa kyerɛ nyinaa.
So he asked him,
Eti obisa no sɛ,
he asked Jesus,
obisa Yesu sɛ,
are you the king of the Jews?
wo ne Yudafoɔ hene no ana?
And Jesus replies him,
Ɛna Yesu yi na no sɛ,
are you saying this yourself or somebody else told you this?
ɔse, deɛ woka no waa na wofiri wo pɛ mu ɛka, anaasɛ obi ɛna ɛka saa asɛm wɔ ɛkyerɛ.
Pilate gets very arrogant at this point.
Ɛma
He gets arrogant. Pilate gets arrogant.
afei ɛma pɛ Pilato enya ahomasoɔ bi.
When Jesus asked him, are you
Yesu
saying
Kristo
this yourself or somebody
ebisa
told
ne
you?
saa no, onya ahomasoɔ bi sɛ, na nso wobebusa m bi.
And he says, why are you talking like that to me? Am I a Jew?
Ade ti na woka saa asɛm wɔ ɛkyerɛ me, Adam yɛ Judani.
Your people have delivered you to me.
Okurɔfoɔ na ɛde ɔmo aba me hɔ.
What have you done?
Ɛde bɛn na wayɛ?
Jesus replies,
Yesu yi na no sɛ,
my kingdom is not of this world.
ɔse, me mahenia no ɛnyɛ wiase yi deɛ.
Oh, so you are a king.
Eti woyɛ ɔhene.
Jesus replies,
Yesu kan sɛ,
you have said I am a king.
wo na waka sɛ meyɛ ɔhene.
To this end I was born. For this cause I came into the world,
Ɛno nti ɛna wɔwoo meɛ ɛbaa saa ewiase yi mu.
that I should bear witness to the truth.
Sɛ memmɛyɛ nokorɛ ho adansefoɔ.
And everyone that is of the truth hears my voice.
Na obi biara a nokorɛ ɛwɔ ne mu no, ɔbɛte me nne.
Then Pilate goes, what is the truth? And he walks off.
Na Paulo hyɛ ase, Pilato se, ɛde bɛn no nokorɛ no, na ɔhyɛ ase ɛnante afiri Yesu anim.
Now at this point, he knew that they had a custom during Passover. Pilate knew that.
Eti Pilato nim sɛ, eduru Twam Afahyɛ no a yɛ obi a yɛyi no ɛma me ekoku no.
Said, you have a custom where we release one criminal to you. Should I release Barabbas or Jesus?
Ɛna Pilato bisa sɛ, eti sɛ no, minyi Barabbas anaasɛ Yesu ɛna ɛma mo.
Barabbas! Barabbas! They cried.
Ɔmo se Barabbas, Barabbas. Afei na ɔmo nyinaa teateam.
This must also have been very painful.
Wɔsu yɛ adeɛ bi a ɛyɛ yie paa.
Because Pilate had just said that he saw no fault in Jesus.
Ɛfiri sɛ na Pilato no atu n'anum tɔn sɛ, ohu afɔbɔ biara wɔ Kristo
So
Yesu.
placing Barabbas alongside with Peter, I mean, Pilate doing this implied that somehow Jesus was also a criminal.
Eti saa Pilato ɔde Barabbas ɛtoto ɔno Yesu Kristo na ɔwɔ Pilato no ɔpa kyerɛ sɛ Kristo nso so ɔyɛ odifoɔ sɛ ne ɔmo ka no.
He decides to do something else.
Afei
Pilate.
Pilato yɛ n'adwe sɛ ɔbɛyɛ biribi foforɔ.
And that's what we call scourging.
Ɛno ne yɛfrɛ no ɛmaabɔ anaasɛ mpire.
You see, you must know what this thing was.
Ɛsɛ sɛ ohun sɛ nea na saa de ne si teɛ.
This is how it was done.
Sɛ nea ɛyɛ no.
The scourge was made of leather.
Saa abaa na saa de korɔ no a yɛde bɔ mpire no, yɛde aboa nwoma a awo paa ɛna ɛyɛɛyɛ.
And then they will implant some bones or stones in the leather.
Na afei deɛ ɔmo de aboa ɛnompe anaasɛ aboa ahyehyɛ saa aboa nwoma no mu.
And then they will tie the criminal to a pillar.
Na afei yɛapɛ pɛmpim bi ne yɛakyekyere owudifoɔ no abom.
And then a soldier who is trained to do this will do the scourging.
Afei yɛwɔ ɔsraani bi a ɔno no ne ntetea wɔyɛ nyinaa ne sɛ wɔhwe nkurɔfoɔ ɔno na ɛbɛdi saa adeɛ no.
And so with each stripe,
Eti aba biara a ɔbɛbɔ no,
the bones and the stones cut into the skin.
nnompe ne aboa no ewura honam no mu.
So Jesus was scourged like that.
Eti wɔkaa ne mpire ankasa.
And then they put a robe on him.
Afei ɔmo de nkatasoɔ bi ɛkataa ne so.
And the soldiers started ridiculing him.
Afei ɔmo hyɛ ase sɛ ɔmo retweetwee no.
Hail, King of the Jews.
Ee Yudafoɔ hene no nie o.
Then they brought Jesus out.
Afei ɔmo twe Yesu Kristo bae.
And Pilate says, I find no fault in him. Behold the man.
Afei Pilato ka sɛ, monhwɛ ɔbɛrima no ni o, mihu afɔbuo biara ɛwɔ ne ho.
The Jews now, I mean, with demonic influence, shout, crucify him, crucify him.
Afe Jewfo ema mo kwan ema bonsam anana tumi boni be rom kan say bonasenuam.
Pilate is now desperate and afraid.
Afe Pilato na ho de onye ehu abono.
You take him and crucify him. I find no fault in him.
I say, Samusi bonasenuam dia, mo fa no kwa nam ko bonasenuam na me de me hu afọbọ bia won ho.
The Sanhedrin replies,
Afe asofo mpanifo no Aisha ne kan say,
we have a law,
ye wo mra,
and by our law he has to die.
na ya mra mu no esese wo.
For he made himself Son of God.
Every so ya no say onyankopon ba.
Now Pilate is terribly afraid after hearing this.
Afe Pilate otin sansem we no osuro na afe de otin sansem na hu abono.
He comes to Jesus.
So ba Kristo Yesu ho.
Where do you come from?
Obisa say for na free ba.
Who are you?
Woni hwan?
Jesus is silent.
Yesu ayedi.
And Pilate goes on, please answer me.
Na Pilato simpa chao. Yimanwe.
Don't you know that I have the power to release you?
Woni to me say metimi ati wa free de okomi nyina mo na.
This Jesus replies him.
Yesu we de Yesu Kristo ma ni mo aye.
And you should love Jesus for this.
Ese wo do Kristo e wo de
You
okomi.
could have no power against me unless it was given to you from above.
Se wa ma to me bi afri so a woni to me bia no a eso se ne me de.
Therefore he that delivered me to you has the greater sin.
Eti dia oyi mi ama wo Pilato no on na e bone kese.
Pilate is now so afraid.
Afa Pilato osuro.
He wants to release Jesus.
Opese wo jai Kristo.
But the Jews,
Na so Judafo no.
the Sanhedrin,
Any asofo no.
they look into his face with demonic eyes.
Afa omodi obonsam ani bi na ehwe Pilato anim.
And they tell Pilate,
Na mo ka kire ne say,
you release him?
so wo jai no a.
You do this?
So wo
You
he a.
are not a friend of Caesar.
Ene na wonye Caesar adafo.
Whoever makes himself a king speaks against Caesar.
Obi biara oya ne ho se ohini biara ka se tia Caesar.
Jews,
Judafo,
clergy,
asofo mpanimfo,
priests,
asofo.
Pilate doesn't know what to do.
Afa Pilato hu de onye bio.
So he comes and sits in the judgment seat.
Afa obetena na temu adwa so.
Behold your king.
Afa mu hini no ni o mo hwa no e.
Away with him, crucify him.
Wo fa ni free man no akobɔ na senuam.
Shall I crucify your king?
Eti mo hini ne me mo na senuam.
We have no king but Caesar.
Afa ni ohini bia se Caesar kwa na e no.
And Jesus was delivered to be crucified.
Afa wo yi Kristo e ma om se yankobɔ na senuam.
They led Jesus down what we call the Via Dolorosa to the place called Golgotha.
Afa wo di Kristo ekoya akopie ba bi friend Golgotha.
They arrive at the place.
Omudu ro no.
They stripped him of his clothing.
Afa entuma ekata no ho no omo yi ni nyina. Omo na deja.
He was crucified naked.
Ye born senuam no da deja.
He stretched him over the cross.
Omo ba ne nsam eto asenua no so.
And this is the way they did it. You see,
Say no mo ye no.
they will nail the leg. You know this little hole here? They go through there like this. So they nail that. Then this goes here. And that goes there. That's how they did it. Then they had prepared a place.
Baby ani ebe born asenua no mo siesie odada.
After nailing him,
Iti omo bo born in nan no mu enadoa no.
the big burly soldiers lifted up the cross.
Afa ya soja fo ahodenfo atwe asenua no.
And they slammed it into the
Na asenua no esi amana na omo to no mu.
That must hurt.
Eyade a ano wo ye yie.
I have this account of what was happening when somebody was crucified. I want to read it to you.
Se ba abebo obi asenua mu a.
Please give me the next slide.
Ye wo niam bi ayeye, me be ka akere mu.
A criminal who was crucified was essentially forced to inflict upon himself a very slow death by suffocation.
O say owudini bi a ye ba abebo na asenua mu no. ye no enema bia ayaya de bia onua eku ne ho nketenkete abra esukom eden wo.
When the criminal's arms were outstretched and fastened by the nails to the cross,
abra ya bai sa odini no ensam ewo asennua no so no,
he had to support most of the weight of his body with his arms.
eti ni nipadua no emuduro ni nyina no esese ode ne nsa na ede na doa abobomu no ena support no.
The chest cavity will be pulled upward and outward.
Eti afei ne koko eno no ebetwia basoro ne mu aban,
making it difficult to exhale.
In
order to be able to draw a fresh breath. Next slide, please. But when the victim's longing for oxygen became unbearable, he would have to push himself up with his feet. Thus giving more natural support for the weight of his body. Releasing some of the weight from his arms. And enabling his chest cavity to contract normally. By pushing himself upward in this manner, the criminal could fend off suffocation. But it was extremely painful because it required putting the body's weight on the nails holding the feet. And bending the elbows and pulling upward on the nails driven through the wrists. Meanwhile, the criminal's back, which had been torn open repeatedly by a previous flogging or scourging, would scrape against the wooden cross. Friends, this was a slow, painful death. Remember, it is Friday. And the Jews have to observe the Sabbath. So what will they do? They will go and break their legs. Break their legs. The legs of those who have been crucified. So they went and they broke the leg of the other criminal. They went to the other one, broke it. But they came to Jesus. And he was gone. They could not break his legs because there was a prophecy about it. They were surprised that he would die so quickly. So they thrust a spear on his side, and blood and water gushed out. And they were convinced that he was dead. Friends, I have taken the time to describe what happened at Calvary for a reason. So much suffering. so much pain.
Ɔkɔ ɔyaw mu.
The Son of God.
Onyankopɔn ba.
And you ask why?
Wobɛbusa saa dɛn?
He did this simply for your salvation.
Wese
And my
nyinaa no
salvation.
wɔyɛɛyɛ no ɛyɛ me ne wo nkwagye ti no wɔyɛ saa.
Now, I know we are used to saying this.
Mehu sɛ yɛtaa ka saa nsɛm wɔ sei.
He died for me, he died for you.
Ɔwu maa me ne wo.
He redeemed you.
Ɔgyee me ne wo.
But friends, this simple phrase that he died for you, he died for me is complex.
Eti anuanom saa kasa sii sɛ ɔwu maa me, ɔwu maa no ɛyɛ ade a emu dɔ.
And throughout the rest of the presentations,
Eti nkyerɛkyerɛ no a aka no.
I'm going to explain why it is that this suffering was necessary and why it is that it secures your salvation and my salvation.
Eti mɛkyerɛkyerɛ deɛ nti a saa ɔyaw a Yesu Kristo kɔɔ mu yi nyinaa hia ne ho hia ɛne boa ɛbɛboa ama me ne wo mmienu yɛanya nkwagyeɛ.
But tonight,
Anwummere yi,
I want us to leave here
pɛ sɛ yɛbɛfiri ha no.
with this picture being captured in your mind.
Ne atwa Yesu amanehunu no mfoni wɔ yɛn adwene mu.
To make a commitment.
Ne esi gyinaeɛ.
If this was for me,
Sɛ eti saa deɛ wɔ ɔyɛ maa me.
then Lord help me understand it.
Ɛne Awurade boa me na mente aseɛ.
And to help us do, I think Carol is going to help us with a song. You see, when you listen to some of the hymns,
Sɛ yɛtie yɛn nnwom nwoma no mu nnwom ahodoɔ a,
there's no question that people who knew by experience what this means wrote these songs.
asɛmbisa bia na sɛ akyinnyegye biara ne ho sɛ wɔn mu a ɔmo twerɛ saa nsankudwom yi no na ɔmo wɔ suahu ɛfa Yesu Kristo wo a wuyɛ no ho.
And I don't want us to sing the normal hymn.
Mempɛ sɛ yɛbɛto yɛn nsankudwom sɛnea yɛto no dada no.
Because I've said before, the reason sometimes we write songs is that we are Africans. When we speak about the blood or suffering, we know what to do to make it touch people.
Ɔsɔfoɔ kyerɛ sɛ deɛ nti a ɛtɔ da bi a yɛyɛ abibifoɔ yɛtwerɛ nnwom ne sɛ yɛtwerɛ na yɛkasa fa Yesu Kristo mogya hwiegu no ho a ɛka yɛakoma kyɛn sɛ obi foforɔ a ɔnyɛ abibini bɛtwerɛ.
And so Osei Boateng has a version of this hymn.
So
Is the
Osei
one-
Boateng atwerɛ nnwom afa saa mogya hwiegu yi ho.
Is that the one I want them to sing?
Ɛno na mepɛ sɛ ɔmo to wo nnwom.
Please, as they sing, reflect on what I've described tonight.
Nti ɔmo toɔ no na wotwa mfoni na wodwen ho.
Hello.
Tamoko. Because University of Science and Technology. University, that was me. There was no way, no power, no talking, no admonition. A foot to be in one everything. Something strangely happened. And when I caught a glimpse of the cross, from where I can't tell, there was power from within.
Things I really like, I didn't like them anymore.
You may be here struggling with something. If you really care about being righteous, something is dogging your steps. I tell you, learn to come to Calvary. There is power in the cross. I was saying this and somebody said, no, Pastor Donkor, that cannot be true. I tell you, you see me like this. I've probably told you here before. When I saw Gulda from the fridge, you know how it comes out of the fridge and there is... After my conversion for 3 years, I still struggle with this. Glory be to Christ. As I kept coming to the cross through this word, I think about it now and it's so shameful. What is it? What is it? Keep coming to the cross. And you will see the power of Christ. And so please, if you can, make it every night. Because we are going to now expand on this.
Nti be ya anwumre bia bra efre se ye ba be ba mu.
May the Lord be with you.
Erade nka wo.
May he keep you safe
Na ommo wo ban.
and help you to keep coming.
Na ommo anada bia bra.
For Christ's sake.
Yesu din mu nti.
Amen.
Amen. Yede nyame ase se wakasa afa na koam. Se ne okan no e be sere se ne esi ahyase mu amunim se ne ne nto aso e besi aye. Ti se wo ba na nko ana se wa ma bie mu a you miss a lot.